Hi everyone, and welcome to the Radults Rad Bite with Bruce Prichard. Bruce is a professional wrestling booker, manager, and producer, currently working as the Senior Vice President of WWE and as a member of their creative team. As a manager for the promotion, Prichard performed under the ring name Brother Love and served as the original manager of The Undertaker. Bruce is also the host of the phenomenally successful podcast Something to Wrestle With, which is making its debut down under this weekend. For those listeners of ours who are not pro wrestling tragics like myself, who are you and what do you do?
Well, I'm Bruce Prichard, and I've been in the wrestling business for 46 plus years, 22 of those years in the WWE. I've done everything there is to do, from backstage production and creative to being in front of the camera as Brother Love, even as myself, as crazy as that happens to be, and host the number one sports and recreation podcast in the entire world, Something to Wrestle with Bruce Prichard. And I am Bruce Prichard.
It sounds like you've done this before.
A little bit.
Now, Bruce, you are working on the podcast at the same time as working for the WWE. Is this correct?
That is correct.
Are you finding it difficult to balance the two responsibilities? And has anyone got annoyed at you so far for pulling back the curtain too much?
No, as far as the content of the podcast, not at all. The issue for me has been time and time management, trying to get everything done with all of the responsibilities that I've heaped upon myself.
That's always the thing in wrestling, though, isn't it? It's a 24/7 business.
It is, and then just thinking that I can do it all and not really knowing when to say, hold on a minute, let me breathe for a second. But breathing is not as important, I guess, as it used to be.
That's very true. Now, as a podcast, we're really interested in the stories of people who have turned their dreams into reality and continue reinventing themselves despite changes that might come up in their way. You're a perfect example of someone who's done that, and someone that we would call a certified Radult.
A certified what?
Radult. Rad adult.
Radult. Okay. All right.
Yeah. So that's what we call folks on this podcast. What I'm curious to know is, how did you make the leap from being this legendary wrestling personality to being this incredibly famous podcast host?
Well, I really thought that overall I was finished with the wrestling business per se, and was working as a civilian, if you will. And my friend Conrad Thompson pitched me this crazy idea about doing a podcast. I didn't think anybody would listen, and lo and behold, they double-crossed me and listened. So we went on from there, and I've enjoyed every single step of the way.
It's definitely a fascinating listen. I don't think people give pro wrestling the credit that it deserves in terms of just how much there is that goes into producing every television show, every pay-per-view event, every match that goes on in a ring. And I think a podcast like yours is actually helping to diversify the audience base. Have you noticed that you've actually ended up converting any cynics into fans?
I think that if nothing else, we have provided an outlet for fans that feel that they haven't been spoken to in many years. Fans from the 80s and 90s that may have gone on and done other things, but yet they were really interested in the product back then. So we let them know that it's okay to be a fan of yesteryear and try to shed some light on a lot of the happenings that took place when they were fans.
And it was a crazy industry back then, and there really hasn't been that much light shed on it. So you've definitely got a very deep array of stories that you can bring to people that I think would actually help shape the narrative of where the business has gone to for them. Perhaps you can be reintroducing them via these stories of old.
I think so. And I think that, it has enabled a lot of the younger talent of today to look back and say, maybe we don't have it as bad as we thought we did. And let them know that, yes, there were folks that were here before you, and maybe there's some lessons that can be learned from obstacles that we faced back in the day. And if that can happen, then it's a good thing. And I just like to kind of go back, and there's always two sides to every story. And for so long, people only got one narrative, and usually it was a negative one. And I was on the other side of that, where I had a blast and had a good time with it. So I like to let people know, hey, it wasn't all bad.
That's true. Now, you're obviously coming out to Australia to do a run of solo podcasts, which is a bit of a different setting to what you usually do with Conrad. What can the folks that are coming out to the shows expect on your tour of Australia?
Well, they can expect to hear a lot of the stories that I just can't tell on the podcast. Maybe they are too salacious or what have you, but I don't want to broadcast it. So it's an opportunity to hear some stories that you're not going to ever get on the podcast, and let people in even a little further behind the curtain. We're gonna have an awful lot of fun, maybe sing a song or two, and maybe even dance.
I really hope that someone brings out the Disco Inferno moves.
Well, I can't guarantee that, but I can guarantee some moves that you might have seen before, but you can't believe you're going to be seeing in Australia. Put it that way.
I'm sure people are looking forward to that. Now, let's have a bit of a chat about wrestling in general and about the career path that you've taken. You've worked for every major wrestling promotion, with the exception of AEW, who are about to launch. What have you found has been the secret to your longevity?
I'm sorry, my computer keeps going off and playing strange music on there.
It's like, it must be a run-in.
Yeah, exactly. It's you had construction going on. Now I have strange things coming up on my computer. I'll mute that and turn it all the way down. But I totally forget the question. I've worked with everybody, and I think that the business is constantly evolving, and for it to constantly evolve, you have to change with the times, and you have to be able to adapt. And I think for any wrestling company, I think it's important to listen to your audience and adapt to what they're telling you, what they like and what they don't like.
How have you found the audience response to Something to Wrestle With has shaped the podcast? And do you have any advice for people who have their own podcasts, of how to best respond to the commentary that comes through?
Well, I think that the best advice I can give everyone is be yourself and don't listen to advice. We had so much advice from people telling us what to do and how to do it, and we kind of went completely against the grain and discovered that going against the grain was something that listeners really wanted. They didn't want, there's a lot of the same old out there. And if you can give people something new to listen to in a different aspect and a different viewpoint, then I think you're going to grab some listeners versus just doing the same old thing with a different voice of what everyone else is doing.
That sounds like solid advice for anyone working in any career field, really, but it specifically applies to podcasting in this instance. I'm curious to know where you see the wrestling business going in terms of it being 2019, and there being a new major player about to launch in the form of AEW, and also the independent scene probably being as strong as it ever has, and the WWE being as strong as it ever has. Do you see new opportunities for people to get involved in the business?
Sure. Right now is a great time to be involved in the business because it's a young man's business. And I think that anytime you have more opportunity, the better that the business itself will become, because you become more competitive. You're not complacent. You're not resting on your laurels. And that's good, not just for you, but it's also good for the product and for the audience, because they get to see the best and they get to choose. If you have a choice, then you make the decision as the consumer. What do you like best? And if you like it, then watch it and support it and enjoy it.
You've worked in pretty much every capacity, from the creative to the performer, to the management side of things. Which of those has presented you with the best experiences?
I really love producing. I love it all, but I think that for me, being able to produce and create is the most rewarding because you get to be everybody and you get to have a hand in how the story is being told. And that's exciting for me.
It's certainly quite the thing to have to piece together too. There's so many elements of a wrestling show, from the athleticism to the drama to the scripting. It's all quite advanced. It's a miracle to me that you ever get any of the shows done, actually.
Miracle to me too sometimes, but we do. And sometimes it's best to work under that pressure of, are we going to get it done? And being live every week is definitely, for me, I love it because it's live. And when you're done with it, you're done with it. And you can, move on to the next thing. Whatever happens live was supposed to happen. So to that end, I love live television, and that's what makes me tick.
Now, you've worked with absolutely everybody, essentially, in the wrestling industry. If I was to put you on the spot and ask you to tell me your top 3 people you've worked with, who would you choose?
Well, I think that back in the day, from a talent perspective, working with guys like Bobby Heenan and Roddy Piper and Hulk Hogan it was unmatched. They were the best in the business. And from a behind-the-scenes aspect, having the opportunity to work with Vince McMahon in the capacity that I have is a learning experience every single day. So for all of that, I wouldn't trade it for all the money in the world.
Those are some fairly intense personalities that you've listed, and people that I don't think many people on the planet will ever get an opportunity to interact with. What is it that you think makes them stand out as people?
Because they were all unique. Every single one of them was their own man and made their way in a business that was about individuals and it was about characters, and they were able to excel at what they did and how they touched it. So it just teaches you to survive.
Now, speaking of survival, we are looking at your podcast coming up towards 3 years of existence. That's insane. Most podcasts flame out way quicker than that. Are you proud of how far you've come?
Extremely, because I didn't think that, look, I didn't know if we would last 3 weeks, much less 3 years. So to still be in the game and still, our numbers are growing each and every week, which is astonishing to me and very humbling. But you look at it and go, this is absolutely amazing that people would want to listen to me for 5 minutes, much less, 2 hours or 3 hours, which the podcasts sometimes go.
I think it's got something to do with the brother love gift of the gab that you have, that keeps people entertained. And also Conrad does a very good job at what he does as well. I heard that the two of you were connected via Ric Flair. Is that true?
That is true. Rick introduced me to Conrad, and we became friends and started working on some other projects. But then we got into this crazy podcast thing and haven't looked back, and made a huge business out of it, and realized that there was a lot more to do than just podcasts with our live shows and merchandising and everything else under the sun.
Now, life is all about taking advantage of those opportunities, and you've taken advantage of the opportunity with something to wrestle with, and it's going to land you in Australia for the very first time in your life, which is something that I was surprised by, given how much work you did with the WWE. What is it that you're looking most forward to about coming out to our country?
Everything, because it's one of those frontiers that I've never explored. So for whatever reason, I've always loved the people, and it's just on the bucket list of places I've always wanted to see. I'm a big AC/DC fan, so to be able to be a part of that and come down and see where they came from. I just have always been fascinated with Australia, and to be able to make that trip, but not only just make the trip, to be able to make the trip and be able to perform in the country and travel the way I am, that's going to be the cherry on top of that sundae.
Absolutely. We look forward to having you out. It's going to be a great time. Now, I wouldn't be a podcaster if I didn't try and get some kind of story out of you before I let you go to do your podcast. Is there anything you can tell me specifically about either, I'll give you two names, either Ric Flair or Bobby Heenan, that would blow people's minds?
Well, I'll tell you this. I'll give you a sneak behind the show. I tell a story about Bobby Heenan in the live shows that I can't tell on the podcast and I can't broadcast, because Bobby was such a special human being, and we had a very unique bond through the years, and he was like a brother, a friend, and a father sometimes, and just a wonderful, wonderful man. So I like to tell a funny Bobby Heenan story, but he was not only, people look at him as a great commentator and a great manager. Bobby was also probably one of the best wrestlers that you ever saw put on a pair of boots. He was incredible and was just so talented that a lot of times the other aspects of his talent get overlooked.
It's definitely a larger than life individual, and somebody who I still have great fun watching on the WWE network.
Now, Bobby was one of a kind there, and there will never be another one.
You're also one of a kind, and you've been very kind giving us your time today. I understand that you've got to go and do your own podcast, so I won't keep you much longer. But I do have a staple element of this podcast, and that is to ask people for their tips for being a Radult, or Rad Adult, if you like. How does someone become like Bruce Prichard?
Oh boy, hopefully they don't. That would be a scary thing. I think my wife and kids would tell you, thank God there's only one. But a lot of hard work, and I think that I've been fortunate that I've never had a job in my life. I never had to go to work, and I've loved everything that I do, and I've had the opportunity to work in the business that I love. And so it's not really work, and it's just a passion, and I love doing what I do every day.
That's a true blessing, loving everything you do every day. One that I'm sure most people are aspiring to. Let's have one quick chat about the future, and I want to know who you think is the future of the business at present.
You know, there's a lot of young talent out there, and there's a lot of great talent on the horizon. And you look at people like Drew McIntyre, AJ Styles. Even though he's not that young, he's still young as far as the exposure that he's gotten. But if I was to have to just pick one, I would look at a guy like Drew McIntyre, who is got an incredible future ahead of him, and is going to be, in my opinion, I think that one day he's going to be a huge star in this business.
I absolutely agree with that. I actually saw Drew when he was taking his little independent sabbatical. He came out to Australia and he wrestled in a tiny venue in a Falls Count Anywhere match. And I actually saw him powerbomb one of our local wrestlers onto a brick barbecue.
Nice.
Yeah. And at that point, I was like, wow, he's going to get back to the E and he's going to change the game. And I think he's on his way to doing so.
Well, I certainly hope so, because he's one of those unique talents that he has the desire and the drive to do it, and big things are going to come his way.
And he's freaking huge.
He's a big boy.
The photo of the two of us standing next to each other is hilarious. Something that will become obvious to you if you happen to see me at your show in Melbourne. Now,
I look forward to it.
Now, thanks for spending time with us today. I will let you go and make another awesome episode of something to wrestle with. Hopefully we can do a follow-up down the line sometime. But before I do say goodbye, is there anything you'd like to tell our listeners?
just come on out. It's going to be a live show you will not forget. And I can promise you one thing, which everybody uses as a descriptor, so I'm just stealing it from somebody else. It will be fun, and you will have a blast. And if you haven't done anything like this, trust me, it'll be worth it. And I know I'm going to have a blast.
Awesome. Thank you very much for being on the Radults podcast. You are a Radult. Have a fantastic day.
All right, man. Thank you, Brandon.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to this Radults Rad Bite with Bruce Prichard. Bruce has the Something to Wrestle With solo shows this weekend on Friday the 22nd of March in Sydney at the Factory Theatre, Saturday the 23rd of March in Melbourne at the Thornbury Theatre, and Sunday the 24th of March in Brisbane at the Triffid. Tickets are available online now, and there's still a select number available. If this is your first time tuning into the Radults podcast, thanks for joining us. I hope you enjoy listening through all of the episodes that made up Season 1, and that we'll have you back here for Season 2.